because of all the things we've talked about that decline as we age, we're seeing this epidemic of neurocognitive diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. When it comes to all these issues, you mentioned keto brain, and I thought, oh, like I'm always looking for brain solutions.
Yeah.
I know I'm at 44 and in perimenopause, so I've seen now a graph of what happens to cognitive function in perimenopause. So it explains why it's a true obsession of mine. Good morning and welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and this is the podcast dedicating to recalibrating your health every day. My goal is to help you wake up each day energized by addressing root causes and giving you new approaches to preventive health. The more we know about integrative health, the more empowered we are in building the vibrant health we want. Hello and welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. It is your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta, and I have an incredible guest in store for you all today, Dr. David Jockers. Welcome, Dr. Jockers.
Thank you, Dr. Shivani. It's an honor to be on with you, and I always enjoy our conversations.
For sure. It's been an honor to meet you and get to know you. So if you don't know Dr. Jockers, he's a doctor of natural medicine. He's done his degree in naturopathic medicine and chiropractic. He specializes in functional nutrition and natural health strategies. He's the founder of drjockers.com, a website that's designed to empower people with science-based solutions to improve their health. And he's gotten over 1 million monthly page views and is considered one of the most well-researched and easy-to-read health websites in the world. And I've been listening to interviews of Dr. Jockers over the last few weeks just to prepare for our interview. And I was just telling him how much I love hearing how he explains health. You make it so approachable and so achievable. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. That's really one of my goals is to make learning about natural health easy, fun, and enjoyable.
Absolutely. So will you kick us off by sharing your story and how you got into teaching health the way that you teach it now?
Well, for sure. Yeah. I think many of us, I've been in the natural health world now for 20 years, and I think many of us got into it not necessarily because we wanted to, but because we actually had a pain to purpose story. And I know for me, I actually grew up in a fairly health-minded family. Like my mom is a naturopath. She was studying to become a naturopath. She was a massage therapist and studying to become a naturopath when I was a teenager. And back then, this was the early 90s. And so the diet that she was learning back then was the macrobiotic diet, which is a very low fat, kind of a very bland, no salt diet. It was like lima beans, a soy, something with soy and steamed kale. And as a teenager, I rebelled against that, of course. But
Yeah.
she taught me, she would say things like, because I would be like, why do I need to eat this kale? And she would say, well, it's going to help you have more energy. It's going to help your skin be clearer. And my brother had acne, my older brother. And so I didn't want acne. So I was like, oh, okay. And she said, well, he's eating too much sugar, too much processed chocolate and candy. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not eating that in that case.
Right.
And I was an athlete growing up. And so if anything would help me play better, if it could help me be a better basketball player, a better baseball player, I was going to do it. I would eat whatever I had to do to be better. And so she knew how to speak to me and motivate me. And so I learned that the food I put in my body is going to impact my performance. And so as I got into my late teens, early 20s, I became a personal trainer because I took that same mindset of, hey, I want to perform at a high level. I was an athlete growing up. I want to perform at a high level. So I'm going to be a personal trainer. I understood exercise. I understood some level of nutrition back then, but I would get a lot of my nutrition information from Men's Health magazine, and they said eat 6 meals a day, all these calories. And so I was eating from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. And eventually it caught up with me, and I developed irritable bowel syndrome in my early 20s. And I actually lost about 25 pounds because I was still eating, but I wasn't actually absorbing the nutrients. And I had orthostatic hypotension. I would go from sitting to standing, and I would feel really dizzy, and I would have to sit down again. And my blood pressure was really low. And I realized I need to do something about this because I'm not getting better. And that's when I started making changes to my nutrition and my lifestyle. I realized, okay, back then I was eating healthier than most of the people I knew. I was eating whole grains and things like that. But for me, my body did better on a lower carb diet. I went on a grain-free diet. I went with organic meats, organic animal products, healthy fats, got rid of all the seed oils. And this is back, 2003, 2004, before a lot of this stuff was talked about. Basically I went on like a more of a paleo style diet. And we called it back then, we called it cellular healing diet, right? And it was something I learned from several of my mentors, and one of them being Dr. Dan Pompa. And so I started that, and I noticed that I was just naturally satiated. Like I felt I didn't have a lot of hunger and cravings. Before that, I would have to eat every 2 or 3 hours. But because this is a higher protein, low carb diet, I just felt really satiated. And so I would start doing intermittent fasting just intuitively. And in about a 6-month period of time, I ended up regaining my weight, my muscle mass. I felt stronger, more energetic than ever. And this is around the time I was starting graduate school to become a chiropractor. And so I saw the transformation of my own health, and I thought, you know what? I want to become a doctor so I can help teach lifestyle and teach natural health and nutrition to others. And that's what I, obviously went on to do. And along the way, I realized I love to write and create content. I love to educate. And that was my favorite part. And so as a chiropractor, I was seeing clients and I was doing functional medicine. I was doing chiropractic adjustments, and I was working one-on-one with people, and I was saying the same things over and over and over again. And the biggest highlight for me when I ran a clinic privately was actually I would do workshops. I would do like a big workshop a few times a month. And I would get, 30, 40, 50, 100 people sometimes a few hundred people for bigger events. And I love that. I love being able to teach natural health principles. And then of course, as the internet started taking off, I realized, wow, I can reach a lot more people by creating content online. And so I just went all in on that. And eventually I eventually sold my clinic, no longer work one-on-one with people, but I'm just, doing everything I can to get as much really good natural health content out to as many people as possible with video, podcasts, with my blog. And it's something I'm really passionate about.
Nice. I love that story. And I love that your mom figured out that motivation point with you. I do that with
Mm.
my son because he is a avid soccer player, and his coach tells me, Adi can go pro. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, Adi, your coach has that much faith in you. It's your job to fuel for it. This is what eating for performance feels like. So I show him, like, I eat for my performance at the gym, for lifting, for all the health goals I have. And it's so good to find that motivating point with the kids, because otherwise it's tough to get them on board with all of our healthy ideas.
Yeah, 100%. Kids need to know what's in it for me,
Yeah.
right? And that's why they choose processed foods, because they think, well, I'm going to get pleasure out of this. And so if all they look at when it comes to food is pleasure is more pleasure or less pleasure, right? Then they're going to always go for the more pleasure. But if you can find major areas, motivational points, whether it's skin health, okay, which is big for a lot of teenagers,
Sure.
whether it's performance in sports, brain health, performing better in school, all of those types of things that can help them, find something that's in it for them that will help motivate and inspire them to make the changes.
Sure. Now, I've heard you speak on the paleo diet and keto metabolic diet. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm vegetarian, and I was sharing that with you beforehand. I'm vegetarian, but I eat eggs and I eat dairy, which there's a whole group of us who
Yeah.
do that when we're vegetarian. Have you found people are able to successfully follow these diets even though they can't or choose not to eat meat?
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely can. And with my, like, I wrote a best-selling book, Keto Metabolic Breakthrough. And I think that getting into ketosis is a physiological state. A lot of people get dogmatic about the diet, right? Using the diet. But it's really a physiological state that all of our ancestors got into from time to time. And that's because our ancestors, they went through times of feast and famine. So if they had a really good hunt or a really good harvest, they were feasting. And if they didn't, and that was, that happened where the harvest wasn't good this year, the hunt wasn't successful, then they went through times of famine. And what happens is when we're feasting, we are obviously eating as much, we're eating a lot, right? And so in our society today, we're in chronic feasting mode. We have lots of food abundance. And feasting for short periods of time can be beneficial. It can actually help improve muscle mass. It can help with natural hormone production. There's benefits to it, but it needs to be cycled with famine. When our body goes into a famine, some amazing things happen. Particularly, this hormone insulin goes down. So insulin is this amazing keystone hormone that when our blood glucose goes up, so when we consume food, blood glucose is going to go up, blood sugar. And if the sugar gets too high, it creates something called advanced glycation end products, where the sugar molecule will bind to proteins and create sticky proteins. And these proteins are highly reactive in the body. They're like shrapnel going through the bloodstream, damaging all the blood vessels, the arterial linings of the blood vessels. This is why somebody with uncontrolled diabetes, they end up with kidney failure, fatty liver, they end up with congestive heart failure, optic neuritis, where they can't even see because the nerves have been damaged. This is because of these advanced glycation end products. So what insulin does is it takes the sugar molecule and puts it into the cell where it belongs, where it can be used for energy. And if we have good insulin sensitivity, we're good at clearing that blood sugar, getting the sugar into the cells where it can be used for energy. The thing about it is the more we are increasing our blood sugar, the more insulin we're going to produce. And over time, our cells are going to dampen their sensitivity to it. And so we're going to end up with a condition called insulin resistance. And now every time we eat, we're going to produce a lot of insulin. And when insulin's elevated beyond a certain threshold, we can no longer burn fat for fuel. And it also signals to the body, it signals to the cells to reproduce, to replicate. And it shuts down our ability to heal and repair the cell. We call that autophagy. And so this is where the body actually will take damaged parts of a cell, okay, we call those organelles, and we'll actually break those down and repair them from the inside out. So this is a process of autophagy. So we need insulin down in order to do that. And so for most people, if we're eating a good diet, a blood sugar stabilizing diet, then we should be undergoing some level of autophagy every night while we're in a fasted state. Our insulin will get down below that particular threshold, and we'll start undergoing autophagy and self-healing and self-cleansing. But if we're eating a very high carbohydrate diet, particularly high processed food diet, we're going to have higher levels of insulin. We're never going to be able to get the insulin down low enough to heal and repair. And so getting into ketosis, what that means is we've gotten the insulin down so low, right, down to this certain point where the body becomes really good at burning fat. And when the body starts burning fat for fuel, it will create these molecules called ketones. And ketones are water-soluble molecules that can get through the blood-brain barrier. You see, our brain needs a consistent supply of glucose to run on, and it can't burn fat for fuel. So if we are, let's say, fasting, or if we're in this time of famine and food is not abundant, we don't have enough glucose to fuel the brain. So what can we use? If we can't get fatty acids, they're too big to cross the blood-brain barrier. That's where the liver produces these ketones. These ketones can get through the blood-brain barrier, and they're a great fuel source for the brain. They also are what we call epigenetic modulators, where they'll actually trigger this breakdown of old damaged cellular organelles. In particular, the main one we focus on is the mitochondria. That's what produces all the energy in the cells. It's kind of a sensory, it's almost like the nervous system of the cell, the mitochondria. And so when ketones are elevated, and they get elevated up into the blood, into the brain, it breaks down damaged mitochondria that aren't functioning well, and repairs them and turns them into new, healthy, young, stress-resilient mitochondria. And now we're going to feel that as better cognitive function, better memory, better mood, better energy throughout the day. We're just going to feel a lot better when we have better, healthier mitochondria. In fact, the quality of our life really comes down to the amount of high-functioning, stress-resilient mitochondria we have in the cells of our body. And the brain is one of the most dense areas of mitochondria. So that's really what ketosis is. Now, you can do diet manipulation in order to get into ketosis, right? Where you go very low carb for a period of time. So very, very low carbs, very low, amount of fruit. You might eat non-starchy vegetables, no grains, and really just focusing on high fatty foods, high protein foods, right? Particularly healthy, ideally, right? Like avocados, olive oil, coconut oil, grass-fed animal products, wild-caught fish, eggs, things like that. And that can help you get into ketosis. But the natural way to get into ketosis is you're eating a blood sugar stabilizing diet, and you're eating it in a time restricted window.
Got
So
it.
instead of eating from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you're eating from, let's say, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. or from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Let's say like an 8-hour eating window, and you eat 3 good solid meals. And I always recommend really prioritizing protein. The reason why protein is important to prioritize is it plays a role in a lot of things in our body. But one of the most important is blood sugar stability. When we get enough protein in our meal, it's going to create satiety where we're going to feel satiated. And it's also going to stabilize our blood sugar, and we're not going to feel as hungry, and we're going to have less of a tendency to overeat. And so somebody can do it. I've talked with people that, are vegans for sure. And it's easier if you're a lacto-ovo vegetarian like you are, because you've got eggs, which are a great blood sugar stabilizing food, very nutrient dense food, particularly if you're getting pasture raised eggs. And then you're also eating dairy. So you've got things like organic Greek yogurt, which is real high protein, right? It's got a lot of different minerals in it, right? It's got probiotics in there. So those are some really good ones. Butter, grass-fed butter, when you're when you're lacto-ovo vegetarian, that you can consume. So that's great. Yeah. So that's great. So you really want to obviously prioritize the protein. Also, like if you are a vegetarian, I recommend using a protein powder from time to time. And there's good ones out there. There's, organic seed-based proteins, organic pea proteins. Find a good protein powder that you can utilize so you can make one of your meals, like, for example, a smoothie, where you can use coconut milk or raw milk, grass-fed raw milk, if you can find that. We get that from our local farmer. Or coconut milk is another good one that you can use. You're putting in protein powder. You can put in berries in there. There's a lot of different things that you could play around with that you can utilize as well. But making a really good protein shake, that can be a great meal for you. If you're using, for example, for most of the vegetarians that I know, they're going to be eating grains. They're going to be eating rice, whether it's, white rice, brown rice, something along those lines. And so when you're doing rice, what I recommend is making sure that you've got a protein source with it, of course, right? So it could be beans. Rice and beans make a complete protein. So if you digest that well, utilize that. And then when you're making the rice grains like quinoa, for example, rice, they're really good carriers for a lot of these herbs that I know you talk a lot about.
Yeah.
And so they're a phenomenal carrier for something like turmeric, getting turmeric in the body.
Right.
And so, and you look at a lot of Indian dishes, and they're using, they've got curry, they've got curried rice, right? So they already figured that out. And, a lot of times they have coconut milk in there. They've got the lemongrass, right? If you're doing Thai. So they've got a lot of different herbs in there, ginger, and apple cider vinegar actually works really well too. Apple cider vinegar has got postbiotics and enzymes that help reduce the glycemic impact of the meal that we're consuming. So if we are consuming rice, of course, is going to elevate our blood sugar. But if we're combining it with like a good acid, like an apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, right, that will work well as well. And then we're adding in things like turmeric in there, or even a curry, which is kind of a combination of different herbs, including turmeric. Then that is going to absorb into our system. And turmeric has a natural blood sugar stabilizing effect and a really potent anti-inflammatory effect. And so we can absolutely do that. We can do, the rice and beans, things like that. Consuming a lot of eggs, of course, in your case is great. We talked about the Greek yogurt, and you can even add in more protein powder into the Greek yogurt if you want to as well, to give it some more flavor. A lot of these are flavored with stevia. Have them with some berries, and that's like a great dessert, for example, right? And so there's a lot of things that you can do, but diet-wise, you got to think about ketosis not as a diet, but as a way of life. And so if you're stabilizing your blood sugar by eating a blood sugar friendly diet, and then not eating from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, and not snacking throughout the day either, but instead eating 2 to 3 really good quality meals, right? For some people, the less active you are, you might only need 2 meals, right? Especially if you're able to eat a little bit larger meal. And then the more active you are, if you're training, if you're exercising, you're an athlete, 3 really good meals with enough protein, enough healthy fats, olive oil, avocados, things like that, grass-fed butter. That is going to help you get into ketosis, right? So, and you want to cycle between being out of ketosis and being in ketosis. It's this feast, famine cycling, which is what all of our ancestors underwent, that is so beneficial for our hormones, so beneficial for cellular healing and regeneration and anti-aging. That's what we want to be doing with the way that we live our life.
Dr. Jockers, you shared so much in that one thing that you just said. My whole brain is kind of blown away. But what I was thinking about and distilling from what you said was last year I presented at A4M Vegas on curcumin for doctors to use in their practice and as a great herb. And when I went to research, because I was like, I'm presenting at A4M, I better build quite a slide deck for this hour or so they're giving me. I just went into PubMed for months and researched, and I am such an optimist. So I was like, okay, well, I've always been healthy and vibrant, and I will just stay this way, this exact way, all the way till the end, till 80, 90, or 100. And the science said everything you just said. And I was just appalled. It said, we're going to have advanced glycation end products, ages. We're going to have our sirtuins impacted, our DNA, our telomeres. We're going to have more insulin resistance. Our mitochondria will be negatively affected as we age. We're going to have less apoptosis. We're going to have zombie cells running around beating everything up inside of us. And I thought, okay, aging is actually a defensive, like I need a very big defensive plan in place to slow the progress of aging if I want to stay vibrant and healthy. But ketosis is something I've always assumed is impossible for me because I'm vegetarian. And fasting, as we know in women, has to be handled differently than men. And so most of the women around me are like, fasting is too hard. I can't do it. And from the Ayurveda perspective, we've always taught you can hold fast. You can hold a 7 to 7. That's easy. And then you can narrow that further for the benefits. And we usually, in the Hindu culture even, take a day off a week and fast completely. But I find nowadays, like you said, we're in constant feasting mode. I sometimes do this. I'll have 4 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner. And it's hard to break that habit and cut down the meals. But you're right. If you're going to have lift days, like today's my lift day, so I will have my 3 meals. On your non-lifting days, if you're just walking and doing your relaxed workouts, movement, I think you can try to cut those meals down to 2. And right now I have a CGM on, and my husband's like, are you diabetic? What are you doing? And I was like, no. This is a very beautiful way to get some data, because sometimes I'll have this feeling of, I just want a little something. And I'll check my blood sugar and it's just fine. And I'll say, actually, you don't need anything. This is just, you need to retrain your mind to not eat constantly 4 times a day and narrow that down. So what I heard you say was, as we age, ketosis with fasting is one of the most powerful tools we have to affect mitochondria, ages, and all these things. Of course, I'm going to come from the super spices angle that we're great too, but I think the synergistic effect of both could be very powerful.
Oh, 100%. We want to use all this together. And, you were talking about obviously using the CGM. I think that's a really great idea. It gives you that instant feedback, which is great. And for most people, we are eating in a sense, we're emotionally eating, right? When we eat food, we get a dopamine release, which is a beautiful thing. It helps us enjoy the food. That's a beautiful thing that God created us that way, where we can get pleasure from our food. The problem is that in our society, we become addicted to the pleasure we get from eating, and particularly with all the hyper palatable, ultra processed foods. These foods are just as addictive as cocaine, right? Where we get this huge spike of dopamine when we're eating, the bag of Frito-Lay potato chips or the Girl Scout cookies. And so we're getting this huge rush of dopamine, and we're addicting our brain to that. And so the way we want to reprogram our mind to eat is to enjoy the dopamine we do get by eating real whole foods. And those real whole foods are going to give us the right amount of dopamine. And then when we do feel kind of the need, let's say we're bored, we're stressed, we want to ask ourselves, am I really hungry right now? Or is it just that I'm bored, right? And I'm looking for a pickup, or I'm stressed out, and this has been my go-to, this has been my tool to relieve stress for a long period of time. And oftentimes, if you just hydrate your body with electrolytes, right? Maybe a little bit of salt and water, it quenches it right away. Like you just feel a lot more fresh, clean, ready to go, right? Sometimes just taking a walk. So there's a lot of things you could do when you feel kind of that boredom or the stress that you're used to going right for something, pleasurable to put in your mouth. There's a lot of other techniques that you can utilize. Just think about somebody that maybe is a smoker, right? How do
True.
they break smoking? Usually they pick up some other activity when they're bored or when they're stressed, right? One of the best is just taking a walk, right? Just
Yeah.
going out, taking a walk, take some herbal tea is wonderful. Exactly. You got it. So there's a lot of other things that you can utilize. Water with electrolytes can be really helpful. You know, even if it's like you have, if sugar is your issue, right? You can start to replace it with stevia, at least in the beginning. I don't like people being addicted to stevia either, although using stevia, I enjoy stevia, throughout the day, but it's great to get it to the point where you're able to go, let's say 16 hours without needing any sort of, food-based stimulation, right? And that
Right.
kind of gives you a nice cleanse mentally and emotionally, right? It helps with a dopamine reset in your brain as well.
Do you use any products to keep you going till 11? Like, I'm not a coffee drinker. I'm a green jasmine tea drinker, and then I drink a lot of herbal teas. And so when you're trying to hold, a lot of people are coffee with fat, which I'm so jealous that they can do that. I'm wondering if I need to add, ghee or butter to my green tea in the morning. I've seen products like Ketone IQ or these products they say you can take that'll keep you in ketosis, but keep you energized. So do you have anything like that people can use at the beginning as they train their body?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people do like for you, you might try the ghee in your tea. That might be really helpful. MCT oil is actually really helpful. So I would say a couple things. Number one is making sure that you're getting enough protein in your meals, right? So like if you're going to do your fast like more in the morning, then you want to make sure for sure that evening meal, the last evening meal, you get enough protein, enough healthy fats in there. And that's like the first step. And then when you wake up in the morning, making sure you're hydrating your body well. All of us are dehydrated because we've been breathing out water vapor. Hydration is something it's very flux, right? It's very, it's going to change throughout the day. And so the more that we're breathing without drinking, the more dehydrated we become. So in the morning, you're dehydrated. So naturally, you want to hydrate your body well. Warm beverages, you're drinking the tea. That's great. It helps stimulate your vagus nerve, which helps calm your body. And it's also very good for helping with peristalsis and moving feces out, basically helping your body detox, helping you pee and poop out toxins. And so that's really beneficial. So that can be really helpful, right? And a lot of people feel hungry right away in the morning, and they really just need to drink some water, and that will help suppress ghrelin, which is this hormone, it's this hunger hormone that comes out of our stomach when there's nothing in our stomach. So the water will increase stomach volume. It will naturally suppress ghrelin. You won't feel as hungry. So hydrating is key. Also, adding in some MCT oil with your meals can be really helpful. The reason why is, and particularly C8 MCT. Now, most MCT oils out there are a combination of C8, C10, and C12, and those are fine. That's like coconut oil, for example. Coconut oil has mostly lauric acid, which is C12. C12 is good, has immune benefits, and that's why coconut oil is so good. But it's not as good for controlling cravings and for creating ketones quickly in your body. C8, which is called caprylic acid, it's antimicrobial, helps kill candida, strep, different things like that. But also on top of that, it turns quickly into ketones. So the liver will immediately take C8, it's only 8 carbons, and turn it into beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the main ketone that circulates in our bloodstream that gets up in our brain. So it turns it very quickly, which gets ketones elevated. When ketones are elevated, it naturally suppresses hunger and cravings, reduces inflammation in the brain. So using a C8, C8 only, it's made from coconut oil, right? It's processed from coconut oil because coconut oil is about 7% C8. 7% of the MCTs are C8 based MCT. And so they take it from that and they concentrate it. And so utilizing that with meals can be really helpful for getting the ketones up, avoiding overeating, reducing cravings as a whole, getting you more into fat burning and being able to extend the period of time between your meals. where you feel great and feel less hungry.
That's
And then
awesome.
also, the only thing with C8 MCT oil is for some people, they're a little bit more sensitive in their gut with it, right? So if you go too much too quickly, you might have loose stools, things like that. So I recommend if you tend to be a more sensitive individual, start with a half a teaspoon with meals and see how you do. If you don't feel like you're a more sensitive person, start with a teaspoon with meals and see how you do. And you can work up to a tablespoon. Some people can even do, 2 tablespoons and they feel great with a meal. So
I
kind of find a good zone for you.
Perfect. I have two follow-up questions to that one. First of all, do you make one in your product line or do you have one you recommend? Because I'm very particular
Yeah.
about what brands I buy for everything. And then secondly, when you use oils, I just had Udo Erasmus on the podcast from Udo's Oils, and he made
Mhm.
this huge argument around flaxseed oil and Udo's 369. And so I bought flaxseed oil and I added a tablespoon to my dinner last night because I was like, I am so omega-3 deficient as a vegetarian. I don't eat anything fish-based in my life. So I'm always trying to find fish oils. I found one that doesn't give you fish burps, but I'm also always worried about rancid, effects. I will find a krill oil, but he made this argument for flaxseed oil. And then he also said every oil that's not solid at room temperature is bad. So for cooking. So I went and bought coconut oil for cooking. We already have a fridge full of ghee, homemade, ready from my mom's house to use. That's organic and,
Mhm.
and properly raised cows and all the things. And then we use a lot of butter for our cooking. So when it comes to MCT oil, would you use it like that? Like I'm taking half a teaspoon and I'm putting it on the food deliberately for the benefits of satiation and my brain health.
Yeah, for sure. So to answer your questions, number one, I have a good one. It's called Keto Brain.
Okay.
And it's a C8 only coconut, coconut oil based one. But yeah, and that's something I use regularly. You can cook with it, but it's in a more expensive oil, and so it is a saturated fat, right? So you can actually cook with that, and it doesn't have flavor. So some people like to do that, but I don't think you. I just feel like it's you're going to get more of the benefits, right? You want to
Yeah.
concentrate those benefits. Yeah, just putting it right on your meal, or just taking it like on the side with your meal, right? I think either one is good. That way, you got your tablespoon, right, or a teaspoon. So I think that's great. And then Udo, yeah, I've interviewed Udo before. I think he's a great guy. In fact, actually, his book Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill was one of the books that I read back when I was on my health journey back in 2004, 2005. Phenomenal book. And that's basically what I've been doing ever since. Is I focus on fats. Fats that are mostly saturated for cooking. They have the best heat stability. They have the lowest, or I should say the highest oxidative stability. So a lot of people look at smoke point, right? And they think, well, avocado oil has a high smoke point, so it must be a good oil to cook with. But really the key thing we should be looking at is what's called the oxidative stability, right?
Okay.
And actually olive oil, when it comes to oxidative stability, even though it's very low, it's got a lower smoke point, it's got a much higher oxidative stability. As long as you get a higher polyphenol olive oil than avocado oil. However, with that said, you lose a lot of the benefits from the olive oil when you cook with it. So I recommend using that raw because those polyphenols like oleocanthals, hydroxytyrosols that are in high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil are phenomenal for your body. They call oleocanthal nature's ibuprofen, right? So amazing stuff, but you're going to get a lot more of that when it's raw. But for some people, they'll marinate meat and things like that in high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil. And that is one way to reduce heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that can occur when you're cooking something at a high temperature. So that can be okay. But the best oils, what I cook with is beef tallow. I cook with butter. I cook with coconut oil, right? Depending on what I'm trying to accomplish and what I want. But those would be the best ones to cook with. Ghee would be another really good one that you can cook with. Yeah.
For sure. And one follow-up question, as we talk about aging, and I know at the end you're going to share your fasting and longevity summit, which I'm so excited about. When it comes to brain health, because of all the things we've talked about that decline as we age, we're seeing this epidemic of neurocognitive diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. When it comes to all these issues, you mentioned keto brain, and I thought, oh, like I'm always looking for brain solutions.
Yeah.
I know I'm at 44 and in perimenopause, so I've seen now a graph of what happens to cognitive function in perimenopause. So it explains why it's a true obsession of mine. But what else do you recommend during that time frame for like that brain support and keeping it online and on point as we're aging?
For sure. Well, getting those ketones elevated, like I talked about, is so powerful. So, one of the things that happens when we elevate the ketones in our brain is it helps balance, it reduces brain inflammation in general. It shuts down something called, it's the nuclear factor kappa beta pathway that in our brain. And that's key, right? So, it helps shut that down. And it also helps balance the glutamate to GABA ratio in our brain. So when our brain has a higher degree of inflammation, glutamate is like it's like the gas pedal in the brain. So it's an excitatory neurotransmitter, and it's very important. It helps us think sharply and quickly and have a good memory. But when it's out of balance with GABA is like the brakes. Just think about driving a car. If you have poor brakes, right? It's going to be wild. It's kind of the same thing that happens in the brain. And so for most people out there in our society, due to our diet, our lifestyle, the toxins that we're exposed to, the stressors that we're under, they have a distorted glutamate to GABA ratio. And that will result in irritability, quick temper, quick anger. It can result in anxiety, depression, whole number of different factors. And so when we balance that glutamate to GABA ratio, we feel more at calm, more peaceful. We have better cognitive acceleration, where we're able to get our brain really moving quickly, better memory, better recall, better mood. We just feel better. We just feel at peace, and joy is easier, right? We have just a natural state of joy when we have that glutamate to GABA ratio balanced. And so this process of feast famine, so powerful for doing that. And then I mentioned the keto brain, or the getting the MCT oil that turns into those ketones quickly, right? And so you get kind of a quick burst of ketones in your bloodstream. And so that can be really, really helpful here. So those would be phenomenal things. As far as supplements go, there's a number of things. Obviously, if you're deficient in anything, if you're deficient in vitamin D, vitamin B12, vitamin B6, right? There's a number of different nutrients that unfortunately many people are commonly deficient in. And if you are deficient in those are all very, very important. Yeah, very
I'm
important for
deficient in all of
overall
them.
brain health.
Will you
Yeah.
share real quick? I know I can't keep you all day, but will you share real quick the supplements that we're typically deficient in, like the vitamins and minerals we're deficient in commonly? Because when you said them all on a
Yeah.
recent interview, I was like, "That's me. I'm deficient in all."
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a big one is magnesium. So magnesium is to the body what oil is to a car, meaning the more we're driving our body, right? The more stress we're under, the more we're driving, the more magnesium we're going to use. And so we need to make sure we're getting enough magnesium. And so most people they're not consuming enough magnesium rich foods or eating processed foods. So we're going to get magnesium from whole, real foods. And then on top of that, a lot of people have compromised digestion, compromised guts. And so they're not absorbing magnesium. So I find that magnesium is a supplement that most people, when they start taking, they immediately notice a difference. They just feel like their brain runs smoother, that they have better energy, they sleep better at night, less tension in their body. Some of the signs of magnesium deficiency are you have muscle tension, you have muscle spasms and cramps, you have headaches, trouble sleeping at night, lower energy, right? Constipation. These can all be classic signs of magnesium deficiency. So magnesium is a really big one.
I feel
Vitamin
like
D.
you just I feel like you just defined the entire American public in the description right
Right.
there.
Most, I would probably say 90% are magnesium deficient. Almost, unless you really are taking really good care of your body, or you're supplementing with a good form of magnesium, you're going to be deficient. Okay. And
Okay.
so I think that's super important.
And can
Vitamin
you
D.
take it morning and evening?
Magnesium, absolutely. So a lot of people, that's a good question. A lot of people think,
It's
because
for
a lot of the
sleep.
magnesiums, yeah, a lot of the magnesiums are marketed as like calm and for sleep. But what happens is if you take magnesium, if you need magnesium and you take magnesium during the day, it helps you focus and concentrate. Less of the ADHD, right? Less of the hyperactivity in your brain. It quiets down your brain and allows you to be able to really concentrate, really focus, and remain calm. And you take it in the evening, your natural circadian rhythm should say when the sun goes down, it should tell you, okay, it's time to sleep, start elevating melatonin. Now, if you have bright lights on in your house, music on, or you're watching a movie or something along those lines, you're eating, you're not going to get those natural signals to fall asleep. but it's not the magnesium, right? It would be the fact that you're not giving the right signals. When the sun goes down at night, is one of the most important things you can do for your health is you need to turn down all the lights, right? You need to dim everything, okay, in your house. I put on blue light blocking glasses to block out any sort of blue light. So my brain knows it's nighttime and starts producing the right amount of melatonin, which is this amazing sleep hormone. But melatonin also is the number one endogenously produced, so our body produces it, antioxidant that cleans and protects the mitochondria. It slips into the double membrane of the mitochondria and helps get rid of some of the most dangerous free radicals that damage the mitochondria. So we really want good melatonin production. We need to make sure that we're dimming those lights. We're giving our body the signal that it's nighttime. But magnesium will help with helping you sleep better, smoother throughout the night. So magnesium for sure. Vitamin D is another big one. Obviously, vitamin D, number one source is the sun. And most people were staying inside so much, right? And we're not getting enough good quality sun exposure. And when people do get sun exposure, a lot of times their body's covered up, right? We really need to get sun on kind of the fattier areas of our body, which, even somebody very lean, like I'm very lean, but the fattier areas are going to be around my belly, my chest, things like that. And so like in a bathing suit, more or less, right? That's where I'm going to get the best possible vitamin D production from the sun. And so I try to get it in the sun as much as possible. This past weekend here in Georgia, I live just a little bit north of Atlanta. It's the fall as we're speaking. So it's cold in the morning, but some of the days it's pretty nice during the day. And, it was like 65, 70 degrees. I spent an hour outside without my shirt on, playing with my kids, right? To make sure I got a bunch of that sun. I try to maximize. If it's a nice day, I try to get 30 to 60 minutes of good quality sun exposure around the middle of the day as often as possible for that. But you can also supplement if you're not able to do that. A lot of people are in areas where they can't do that, or they're working jobs where they're not allowed to, they're not able to. And so you can also supplement with a really good quality vitamin D3 product as well. And magnesium and D3 really work together. If you're taking vitamin D, but you don't have enough magnesium, you're not actually going to convert it into usable form. So really taking those together is really key.
Nice. Is there anything else we should take with our D? I know we're supposed to take D3, K2, but as an Indian, what you basically just said is you need to go sit in a bikini in your backyard to get the sunlight onto all the parts of you that matter. And honestly, as an Indian, we don't do that. Like we first of all don't go in the sun. And then certainly won't go scantily clad enough to absorb all that D. So what else can we take with our D to absorb it?
For sure. The more melanin you have in your skin, the darker you are, the more sun you need, right? So in order to produce the vitamin D, your ancestors grew up near the equator. So the sun they got was stronger than the sun that somebody that's Caucasian like me would have gotten from my ancestry. And so yes, taking vitamin D is key. Taking it with vitamin K2, most people need more vitamin K2 anyways, right? We're learning all this new research about vitamin K2 and how it helps modulate the immune system, powerful for, bone health. Most people think about vitamin K, they think about this blood coagulant form, which is vitamin K1. Most people get enough of that, but the vitamin K2, which comes from fermented foods, or you can also find it in things like egg yolk, that has powerful hormone balancing effects in the body, as well as immune modulating benefits. And so you can get vitamin D3 with vitamin K2, and they work together to take calcium out of the bloodstream and put it into the bones where it belongs. We don't want excess calcium in our bloodstream. We want it in our bones. Helps form strong, healthy bones. And so vitamin D3, vitamin K2, if you look at vitamin D rich foods, they also have the other fat soluble nutrients like vitamin A, for example, egg yolk or butter. It's got vitamin D in it, but also has fat soluble vitamin A, retinol, that's in there. And vitamin A is important for helping to activate the vitamin D. And so vitamin A is key. Other things would be zinc. Zinc in general is key for all hormone function. And vitamin D, even though it's called a vitamin, it actually acts as a hormone in the body. And so if we're zinc deficient, which is really common in our society, then none of our hormones are going to work properly. Zinc is really key for DNA expression and for hormone expression in the body, as well as immune balancing, immune modulating. It's really key for that. During COVID, there was a lot of talk about zinc as an antiviral, right? And it is, right? It helps stop viral replication in the body. And so zinc is key. If you're sick, if you have a cold or a fever or flu, you're using zinc quickly. Okay. But most people need more zinc. And I recommend getting a zinc copper test where you can look at your, I think it's your plasma zinc and serum copper, right? It should be around a 1. You should have a tiny little bit more zinc than copper, not too much more. And honestly, I've seen this test so many times. It's very rare that I ever see somebody with a lot more zinc than copper.
Yeah.
Unless they're supplementing with really high doses. But taking like an extra 10 to 20 milligrams of zinc a day can be really beneficial for hormone health, right? For females, it really helps with elevating progesterone. And a lot of women have poor progesterone function because of chronic stress, because of perimenopause, menopause. Younger women, it's usually a stress and toxin related issue. Too much stress, too much toxin exposure, blood sugar imbalances, they're not able to produce enough progesterone. So zinc really helps with that. It's great for balancing the immune system, great for testosterone production for men and women, which is very important for men and women. A lot of women think testosterone is only for men. But testosterone is really key for fat burning, for building healthy, lean body tissue, bone and muscle tissue for women, for libido, for mental health, brain health. And zinc is really important there as well.
Wow.
Thyroid, zinc is really important for converting T4 to T3, right? Which is the active form of thyroid. So a lot of people that are struggling to lose weight, fatigued, feeling bloated, right? Zinc can be really helpful there.
Can you speak to why food isn't enough sometimes? Because there's so many people who I talk to, and everything you just named, first of all, I'm deficient in. Second of all, I'm in perimenopause. Third of all, I have no progesterone. So I'm taking progesterone, I'm taking testosterone. I'm on a whole new plan called Optimizing in Perimenopause because I just learned Indian women go through menopause way younger. So if a Caucasian woman traditionally will go through menopause around 51 to 52, Indian women at 46. And I was like, okay, it's a transition. It's coming. Great. What do I do to be so optimal and keep all my brain energy and physical energy that I want? And what you just explained was so powerful. And a lot of us are trying so hard through real food to get there. I order farm direct because I'm in Florida. So there are farms within an hour of here that have pasture raised organic eggs and organic produce and all those things. Even still, even eating a high protein, low carb, good fats, organic, fresh diet. Like I even have the salad piece of my breakfast sitting here with everything raw, wild arugula. Still, I feel like we are trying to fill a gas tank and the gas quality is wrong. And we're only getting a quarter tank, but we think we're filling up to full. And thus we need potent supplements. So will you explain that?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, our food has a lot less nutrients in it than for our ancestors because we've overcropped, we've used a lot of herbicides, pesticides that have damaged the soil. And so really the food that we're eating is only as good as the soil it's grown in. And it's just an unfortunate reality where it's just not as nutrient dense as it used to be. So that's a big factor here. On top of that, the stress, the toxins that we're under, a lot of people's digestive systems aren't working real well. So they're not extracting the nutrients as efficiently as, you would hope. And so low stomach acid is a big issue. A lot of us are eating on the go. We're eating in a stressful state. We're eating on the go. And therefore, we're not going to produce the amount of digestive juices, stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes in order to really break down and digest and absorb and assimilate these nutrients. And so the idea of fast food is counterintuitive to good health, right? Not only are obviously most fast food restaurants serving really poor quality food, but just eating fast in general is not a health and longevity principle, right? We need to eat slower. We need to be in a relaxed state when we're eating. And so that's really key. I know parents out there can be really tough, especially when you got young kids yelling and demanding stuff to kind of slow things down. Right. But that is really important for good overall health. So I think that's key. And then like with Indians, a lot of you guys are vegetarian vegans. And so the best sources of zinc, vitamin B12, things like that are going to be your animal-based foods. Right. And for many people are not getting enough of those. Right. So then supplementing becomes even more important in those cases.
Right. No, absolutely. Otherwise, you're chronically running these deficiencies, chronically not supporting your pathways,
Hmm.
and then wondering why we're manifesting so much disease in the body. It's because the cellular health is just not supported. And I think about that a lot because my whole family is diabetic. My family history is all full of diabetics. And
Yeah.
like we talked about at the beginning, as we age, insulin resistance is an issue. So it's almost like you have to double down on your approach to your health as you're aging, which many of us don't want to do. But it seems to me that it's becoming twice as important that you bring in the fasting discipline, that you bring in eating in a new way. You can't lean on your old habits. You have to change those habits.
Yeah. And when it comes to fasting, here's what I want people to understand. Fasting is kind of like exercise. If you have never exercised and you go and you start lifting weights, it's not going to feel comfortable. Like you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to be sore the next day, right? It takes some time and some repetition to actually build a level of what we call fasting fitness, where your body gets more resilient, gets used to this. And it is a skill actually that your body, and intelligence that your body will develop, right? But you got to do it the right way. I talked about blood sugar stabilizing diet, hydrating your body well. You got to do the right principles. Okay. Keeping stress under control is always important here. Really prioritizing good sleep. All of those things make fasting easier, right? To where you don't, like, for me, I don't have to think about it. It's just really intuitive. Okay. I typically eat, most days I'm eating 2 to 3 meals, and I usually eat between like 1 and 7 p.m. Right. And I feel great. Right. And then one day a week, I'll do a 24-hour fast where I'll eat lunch, fast through dinner, and eat lunch the next day. And I really feel fantastic. I very rarely am actually feeling like really hungry. In fact, a good sign that you're very metabolically healthy is you don't feel hungry until you start eating. You start eating your meal, and then it kind of wakes up your digestive system. And you're like, oh, okay, it's time to eat. Now I actually feel hungry, and I know I need to eat a good amount because my body might go a long period of time without eating. So I better get as much calories and quality nutrients as I can right now. That's
Wow.
actually a really good sign. If you're driven more by hunger throughout the day, it's a sign that you have lower level of metabolic flexibility. You're not as good at burning fat. You have more of the insulin resistance. The more insulin sensitive you become, the better you are at burning fat. So most of us, even me, like I'm very lean, 10% body fat, but I have enough body fat to last days, right? Like there's plenty of extra calories on all of our bodies that we can be utilizing for energy if food is not available. So we really shouldn't be hungry a lot throughout the day. Okay. And so, it's again a really good sign that you're metabolically flexible when you don't feel hunger, you don't have cravings throughout the day. When you start eating, you're like, okay, it's time for me to eat. I start eating, and then I'm like, okay, I'm hungry. I can actually eat a lot of food here, a good amount of food. So that will help stabilize my blood sugar until, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours later.
I love that you called it fasting fitness and a skill because so many of us have tried it, failed, and said, I give up. That was hard. I
Yeah.
obviously can't last till 10. I can't last till 11. I'm hangry. I'm mean. It's not worth it. I was fasting yesterday because of blood work, and I showed up at my office at 10, didn't have the right breakfast on hand, just started
Mm.
eating. And my COO was like, I'm not talking to you until you've eaten because I can tell the mood you're in. And she
Yeah.
can always tell that. So I love that you called it fitness because just like when I go to the gym and I'm able to lift heavier and heavier for legs, that's a very gradual process, and it's
Mhm.
building the skill over time. So we can narrow that window slowly. We don't have to be so harsh
Exactly.
about it. And then we
And it's
we
not
can
an all or
remember.
one. It's
Yeah.
also important to understand it's not an all or none. That's what a lot of people think. They either have to do it every single day or they're not going to be successful. And you could do, like, there's a lot of different fasting strategies, where you do something like crescendo fasting. Crescendo fasting is 2 days a week, non-consecutive days. You do a 16-hour fast. The other days you're doing like a 12 to 14-hour fast overnight, which I think everybody should be doing at least a 12-hour overnight fast. 12 to
It's
14 is usually
easy.
pretty easy to do, right?
Yeah.
Pushing it, if you're used to doing 12 to 14, you want to do a 16, it's going to take a little bit more intentionality. But if you just do that 2 days a week, let's say Monday and Friday, non-consecutive days, kind of like exercise again, right? Like if
Sure.
you're trying to get in shape, do 2 days a week of training. That's going to help you. It's going to be a lot better than none. Okay. But doing those non-consecutive days gives your body time to recover, right? Between. So doing it 2 days a week, that will help improve your insulin sensitivity, help get your body starting to produce some of those ketones, right? So that can be a really good strategy if you're new to fasting, where you just do it like that, or maybe every other day, right? Like 3 days a week or something like that. So again, it's not all or none. Fasting should be a way of life. It's a lifestyle, and find a regimen that you feel like you can be successful in. And I think that's really the key.
I love that. Thank you. You made that so much more approachable and doable. I can take my non-lift days, because I'm lifting 3 days a week, yoga twice, walking in between. Non-lift days, know for a fact you're going to really contain that. You're going to expand the fasting window and contain when you're eating, and really plan ahead for those meals, but really support yourself, the hydration, the sleep, the different things you talked about, so that you can be ready for it. Don't just go crashing into it and then crash into a wall, but slowly training the body as if it's like the other fitness day, but through food.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
love that. That's wonderful. Well, Dr. Jockers, I had so many more questions for you. I wanted to ask you about your daily routine. We were going to talk super spices, but I know we're hitting the end of the hour and you probably have other interviews and things going on in your day. So will you share with our listeners today any last words, your website, and about this fasting and longevity summit you have coming up soon that they can sign up for to kick off their new year?
Well, for sure. Well, thank you again for having me on, Dr. Shivani. I always enjoy our conversations. Really an honor to be on your podcast here and to be a friend of yours as well. And you guys can find me at drjockers.com, best natural health website, in my opinion, right, in the world. Any questions that you have, obviously, we have in-depth blogs, podcasts on all those different topics. And then, I'm putting together this fasting and longevity summit. I really think that fasting is the most ancient, inexpensive, and powerful healing tool known to mankind. All of our ancestors did it. It's built into our blueprint. It doesn't cost you anything. And it's incredibly powerful when you understand the actual science, the physiology of what's happening when you undergo that period of famine, like we talked about. And there's many different ways and strategies. And then we go through in this summit, there's the fasting mimicking diet, which is a kind of a, it's a way of eating that actually helps your body mimic a extended fast, where you're actually undergoing deep levels of autophagy. You're helping to balance hormones, and you're also stimulating stem cells, right? So rather than undergoing expensive stem cell therapies, you're actually getting your body to produce its own natural stem cells. And research has shown that actually it's reducing your biological age pretty significantly when you're doing things like this. And so we talk a lot about the fasting mimicking diet, intermittent fasting, extended fasting, partial fasting, a lot of different strategies with that. And of course, how to successfully set yourself up for fasting too. So guys, if you're interested in longevity, if you're interested in strategies to take your life and your health to the next level, check that out. Fasting and Longevity Summit coming up to start the new year here.
Nice. I love that. What a beautiful way to start the new year. And thank you for bringing so many of these ancient wisdom practices forward. We very much think alike, Dr. Jockers. And thank you everyone for joining me today on the Fusionary Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta, and you can learn more about this podcast at drshivani.com. So thanks everyone for joining. Share this with someone who could use this wisdom and knowledge today. And I'll see you next week on the podcast. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health Podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.